Welcome to Chasing Hard podcast, where we talk about trusting God when life doesn't turn out the way you planned. If you're anything like me, you've experienced at least one thing in your life that didn't turn out the way you thought it was going to go. And if you're anything like me, it's been multiple things, not just one, some big, some small, but life has a way of turning out differently than we planned. I am super excited to have as a guest today, Shawna from A Little Less Toxic. Welcome, Shawna.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
I was so intrigued when I saw A Little Less Toxic because I'm immediately thinking, like relationships and the dynamics of families and stuff. But with a little further probing, you're everywhere. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about what that means and what you do?
Yeah, I think it means everything. you know? Even so I think a lot of it depends where you're coming from, right? But some people do see it in the way that you're describing, and then other people think it means like, oh, non-toxic living. And it really is all those things. And my
Mm,
approach to non-toxic living is hopefully in a way that is not toxic to our minds and our emotions and to our
love it.
relationships. And also considering how toxic relationships and thoughts and ways of living
Yeah.
can impact our health as well. So it's all of the things.
Well,
Yeah.
that's really cool. I love how you that it. I mean, it is that is all the things, but I love how you are bringing all of that together. So, like, do you find yourself focused on one thing more than another?
No, I
Okay.
don't think so. I mean, maybe somebody else from the outside looking in would say a different answer to that, but it's really just living every day, making choices, big or small, mostly lots of little choices to try and live a little less toxic.
I like that because we always have choices.
Mhm.
And I guess it took me a while to figure that out, that, it's really not about what happens to us. That's how we choose to respond to the things that happen and will inevitably happen because we live in a fallen, broken world. So, what started you on your non-toxic journey?
Yeah, and I know the premise of your podcast too is like that chasing hard. It's like when things don't turn out the way that you expect them to. And I would say all of that led me to where I am today with
Mm,
brand or business or whatever you want to call it,
mm,
but it's what the Lord is asking me to steward in this season of my life. But I would say what happened with me is I did not grow up this way, where I'm living, with non-toxic living or any of that. I was just a regular 80s, 90s kid that was living very conventionally. It was a lot of, like Hamburger Helper and all of the Clorox and all of the things, right?
yeah.
Just the way all of our homes really were. And I would say as a young adult, I remember saying to my best friend, I love chemicals. Like I thought they were a great invention. I loved fast food and
Yeah.
packaged goods.
Yeah.
My idea of health was 100-calorie packs or like trying to eat more celery. Like, I
Yeah.
didn't really have a concept of what any of these items might be doing to my health. And I was, for the most part, healthy from the outside looking in, or even
Mhm.
on paper. All my labs are normal. But I ended up suffering some significant health challenges for some years. I was in college when I got a sinus infection, or so I thought. And I went to
Yeah.
the clinic and they treated it with antibiotics and it went away. And then it came back like a month or so later. So I did the same thing and then it went away. But then I started getting them over and over and over until they were running together and until this went on for 5 years. And the last of
Wow.
those 5 years, for an entire year, I was in pain 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and the amount of pain would just ebb and flow. I saw every doctor in my practice. I saw ENTs and neurologists. I had CAT scans,
Oh
allergists. I was
my
doing
gosh.
everything to try and find a way to be out of this pain. It was truly crippling me in some aspects, and it was definitely diminishing my quality of life and my ability to, participate in life the way that I really think God had designed me
Right.
to. And at the end of this 5 years, I was on antibiotics again because oftentimes that was always a doctor recommendation.
Right.
Just take antibiotics and steroids and deal with it. And so I was doing that, or taking over the counter stuff to just try and function.
Yeah.
And my health was just getting worse and worse. And at the end of this 5 years, I had a little hangnail on one finger that got infected really quickly, and overnight it was pulsating when I went to bed in the morning. That pain was gone, and long story short, I noticed some pain in my underarm later in the day, and I went to urgent care to let them know, hey, I think this is an infection that's spreading. And they gave me more antibiotics and said I should be fine, but if it were to spread, to go to the emergency room, and it did spread. And I ended up with sepsis that was a resistant strain of staph infection that didn't want to respond to antibiotics. So I was on a week of IV antibiotics, followed by a
Oh my
month
gosh.
of antibiotics, and seeing now infectious disease specialists and my team, and no one could tell me what had happened or how to avoid this. And there was still no, and with a month of an antibiotics and a week of the IV antibiotics, I still was in pain. So that didn't eliminate my pain either. So now I'm desperate. Like something's got to give. I almost died,
Oh,
and I
wow.
can't keep
And you're a
taking.
young woman.
I was 29 at the time, I
That's
believe.
crazy.
Yeah. Um, yeah. So it was, I had brand newly married, we're just starting our lives. I'm a substitute teacher. I can hardly work as it is because of my
Mm.
pain, and just trying to survive in LA on one income. It was just
Oh,
crazy.
yeah.
It was just miserable. So they had no answers for me, and I knew I can't just keep taking these antibiotics. I just instinctively knew this is making my health worse.
Mm.
And so my mom actually saw someone on TV talking about inflammation, and I read this woman's book and learned about how different foods can be contributing to inflammation,
Mm.
chronic inflammation, not just acute. And I
Wow.
realized I was very inflamed. So I did an elimination diet to try and figure out if any of these foods were contributing to that for me. And it turns out they were. But
Mm.
within, I want to say it was under 2 weeks of eliminating some foods just to see, I was pain free for the first time in a year. So it was
Wow.
obviously an inflammation thing going on
Right.
with me. No antibiotics in the world were going to cure.
Wow.
But it caused me to start reading ingredients on things because I had to be very careful what I was
Mhm.
eating if I was going to do this correctly. And I started realizing I was eating tons of things without paying any attention to the
Right.
ingredients. If anything, I'd look at the calories and that's it.
Right.
There are just so many ingredients in these things. I
Crazy.
didn't
Yeah.
even know what they were. I had to, Google, what is this? Like,
Right.
what am
Yeah,
I
I mean, for
eating?
sure.
I
Yeah.
don't recognize. And kind of to long story short, that was in 2013. So I guess I was like 30, 31. That was in 2013. And then so I started just reading the ingredients on everything.
Mm.
Like, what am I using, putting in on
Right.
in my
Yeah.
body? And I just started to swap things out little by little with something that was a little less toxic, not perfect, but
Right.
what I could afford that was a little
Yeah.
bit better for my health and made sense for our situation. And I not only was I pain free for the first time in a solid year, the pain didn't come back, and
Mhm.
my skin cleared up. I was sleeping better. I had better energy, better mood. My hair felt healthier. My skin was glowy.
I'm sure.
My joint pain went away.
Oh, wow.
It was completely life altering. So I got really excited, and I kept telling my family and friends that I knew they're also suffering chronic
Mhm.
inflammation too. That's what these things probably are. And so a lot of them started to make some of these changes too and saw a big improvement in their health. So I just kept
I
sharing.
love that.
And then eventually some friends and family kept nudging me to start a blog or something. So I
Yeah.
eventually started my public Instagram page, and I called it A Little Less Toxic. And there's another long story there about how we're here and how this is not what I planned, but God had a different plan for me. But we
Ah,
that too.
that's so cool. Well, I- and I don't want to get political because this is not a political thing, but you have to appreciate wherever you stand on the political spectrum, JFK, his stance on the health and our food and pharma, because you do look at the list of ingredients on the simplest thing. And years ago, it wasn't. It was more like that. And I'm not saying it was even healthy food back then, but what we're ingesting through our skin, through even through the airwaves, through everything is there's a lot of toxicity in America. I don't know if it's like this in other countries, but he talks about you didn't see obesity in kids. When I was growing up, I grew up in the 60s, 70s, and that was like it wasn't the norm. You
Mhm.
didn't have fast food joints on every, 10 on every corner or whatever. It's our lives have it's just changed drastically and it is affecting our health.
Absolutely. Even McDonald's, before I was, or right around the time I was born, their fries were made with potatoes and tallow and salt. That's not
Yep.
unhealthy,
Right.
And
Right.
now they're upwards, I think it's more than 10 ingredients, and
Mm.
it's
They
insane,
don't even taste as good as they used to taste. I mean, they
right?
changed the taste. Yeah, and here's the thing that finally hit me is because I grew up on margarine. We didn't use butter. And I'm like, butter is like margarine is fake. Margarine is full of whatever, and it was supposed to be better for you because it had less calories or whatever. I don't know, but it was junk. It's poison to your body. And even with milk and whole milk and 1% and skim, like, I feel like the natural way that God created our food should have stayed that way a little more.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's every time we kind of interrupt what he has planned, what he has designed,
Yes,
there's some
there
consequence, right?
are
And we're
problems.
seeing that,
Yeah.
seeing the
Yeah.
fruit of that. And a lot of people are realizing and waking up to it and wanting to do something
Yeah,
differently.
for sure. I
Open
think it's a
the
good thing.
whole
No matter
hand.
what happens, I think he's brought an awareness that a lot of people weren't conscious of. And so maybe it's made, the moms that are following him now, that we're all more aware of what we ingest, however we ingest it. And I think that's a good thing.
I do too. Absolutely.
So, did this affect your faith, or were you a Christian at the time when you were going through this pain? Like having pain affects every part of your life. It's hard to function just for a small amount of time when you're in pain, but to live in constant pain is hard for me to fathom.
It was really difficult. I mean, I had my church that my Bible study group would lay hands on me. Everyone was
Mm.
praying for me. I was praying. I was desperate, begging for God to remove this pain. And I'll probably get emotional because I don't know if I've ever had the opportunity to piece this all together in an interview before.
Hmm.
But what he's done because of the pain
Mm.
has been nothing short of miraculous in my life and hopefully in others as well. But so I was begging and begging that he would remove the pain and eventually he did, but it had to be me realizing something and taking part in that miracle too, right? I
Yeah,
had to
yeah.
I had to realize something and change something. And because of that, I've been able to then, like I said, I was telling friends and family and helping other people realize that they could have more health freedom too. Because, I know that God can use me in my illness. If He has ordained a time for
Right.
me to be ill, He is going to use that for His good and for His
Amen.
glory. And I am blessed to be able to participate in that. But if I am causing my own pain and my own illness, I'm
Yes.
standing in my way of doing what he's called me to do. So
Yes.
being able to be free from that has enabled me to live a much more full life and hopefully for his glory. And then what he did through it, it has just been incredible because let me kind of
You're good.
butt in anytime. So this all happened for me in 2013. I had my first child in 2015, and at the time I was a full-time teacher. I finally got a full-time job after my pain healed, and full-time teaching until 2015. And then, we had our first baby. So I stopped teaching so I could be home. But our plan was always putting air quotes, our plan was always that I was going to, have our babies. And once they were school age, I would go back to teaching. And so I had our first baby in 2015. We had our second baby in 2016. And lots of things changed in that time. I started sharing in late 2018. It was almost 2019 when I started that public Instagram page. And it
Okay.
was just, I'm a stay-at-home mom with two little ones, and I'm doing these things anyway. I might as well use the
Yeah.
internet, share with someone who it might help. And it turned out a lot of people were excited about that, and the account grew pretty quickly. And I still had the plan that I was going to return to the classroom. And at the same time, the account was growing. And then there were some different things that came up that made us start to consider homeschooling. Not because I had this business or whatever, just because of a lot of other things, right? And
I'm a
it
homeschool mom. My kids are grown, but I was a homeschool mom.
Oh,
Yeah.
so encouraging. Yeah. So it was, 20, my son would have started kindergarten in 2020.
Okay.
So
Oh.
timing of all this, right? So in 2019, we're like, what are we going to do?
Man.
Homeschooling is really pressing upon us. There were some things that happened in California at that time too. We're like, what are
Oh.
we going to do? And so we're strongly considering homeschooling, but both of us are completely homeschool ignorant. We had the conception that homeschoolers were weird.
Yes, yes, yes. And they all
We
wore denim and they, yeah, had funky haircuts, stuff like that.
Right. I start researching and finding out more and more that this actually sounds like this might be a good thing, but I'm
Yeah.
still uncertain about it. My husband's definitely uncertain about it. But then it's 2020, March hits, everything shuts down, and I
And
am not.
everybody's homeschooling.
Everyone's homeschooling,
Yeah.
and I'm not going to do what they're doing. I know by now that's not homeschooling,
Yes.
but I am not
Yes.
sending my 5-year-old little boy in a mask to a school. Like I'm not
Yeah.
doing that. So
Yeah.
I don't the Lord made it very clear that we were choosing this, and
Mhm.
then that happened. He made it very clear that it was the right choice for us in that season, and we've taken it one season at a time. And at the same
That's
time,
good.
he grew my platform. I got offered to write a book. I since that time written 2 books. I've collaborated with brands. I have sold thousands of copies of my books, and he has sustained us in financially
Mhm.
and in every way so that I can continue to homeschool my children and so that I can continue to teach. I'm
Yes,
teaching in a
because
different
you are
way.
teaching. You're just not in a classroom like a, yeah,
Exactly.
for sure.
And hopefully helping other people
Yes,
to find ways that they can reasonably and sustainably live healthier lives
I
for
love
the
that.
good and glory of God. So,
Amen. That's
uh,
awesome that you're doing that. That you get to use your teaching skills, that you get to I love homeschooling because the years fly by and that time with my kids, like it was hard. I'm not gonna lie. There were lots of days where I was done. I didn't want to homeschool anymore. Um, I would go back in a second just because I appreciate that special time that I had with my kids. And in hindsight, it went so quickly.
yeah, how old are your babies?
So my oldest is 34, my second one is 32, and my youngest in California is 28. And they contribute to society. They're functioning, healthy individuals, and they're not. I mean, they can be weird. I'm weird. I can be weird. We can all be
I'm
weird, but they're
weird.
not.
Yeah.
I know, but they're not that. What is it that stamp of homeschool weirdness? Like it's
Right.
not. And I loved how you could um like make a personal plan for your kids, like how they learn differently.
Oh yeah.
My youngest hated reading and he hated tests, but he's
Mhm.
smart. Like he learns things. Like I always teased him and said he was like a walking encyclopedia of useless facts. He just knows, it's osmosis. He just knows a lot of things. And so we were doing a co-op and we were studying the state of Kentucky, which is where we live. And his teacher, my friend, gave everybody in class a test and he failed miserably, but she knew he knew the information. And so she called him up afterwards, school was out or whatever, the class was over, and gave him the test orally and he knew it all. He
Yeah.
just wasn't a test taker. Now he's changed since then because,
Right.
college, but we're different. We learn differently. We're not this, cookie cutter person that we
Right.
have to be to fit into a school system.
That's right. Yeah, I was when I told you I was investigating homeschooling, right? And so I went to this seminar. It was called The What, the Why, and the How of Homeschooling
Mhm.
with a former homeschooling mom that now helps other people,
Yes.
figure out their homeschool plan. But she was explaining why people might choose homeschooling and was explaining, some faults that are in the classroom, like what you're describing, like that there's a box, and if you fit in there, then it will
Yes. Then
probably go pretty
great.
easy
Yeah.
for you. But some people are more advanced or struggle in
Mhm.
different areas. And if you're out, and I'm in the back of this room nodding my head off. So at the end, the lady that was leading it, she said, "Excuse me, do you happen to be a teacher?"
Ah,
I said, "Yes."
yes. So you would know that more than anybody. You
Yes.
know. And it makes sense because you have a class full, what, 20 to 30 kids, but you have to teach them all in a group, one certain way. You can't teach them individually because that wouldn't work. So,
Yeah.
wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Homeschooling is a good thing, and if anybody is interested to do research on your own because it's not the stereotypical. Yeah, it's different for everybody. It's
No.
different for everybody.
Yeah.
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 Okay. That's so cool that you're doing that. And in California, is that I love the state of California.
Me
Since my
too.
son moved there, I think is amazing. I don't think I can afford to live there, but it's beautiful. I'm in awe of it every time I go there. And the people there are amazing and I love it. So, but I do know there are some different rules and regulations there. Is it hard to homeschool in California?
No, incredibly, it's very, very easy to homeschool here. The
Wow.
regulations are very minimal, which
Good.
it does. I'm crossing my
Surprised?
fingers that last. Yeah,
Yes.
we allow raw milk here, where some states don't. There's some things I'm just a little bit curious about.
Wow.
But yeah, no, it's very easy to homeschool here.
Good. It
Yeah.
is in Kentucky as well, but I know you have to jump through some hoops in different states. So,
Yeah.
and that's I get it, I guess. I mean, some parents homeschool and they really aren't. They're
Hmm.
just
Yeah.
their kids aren't learning anything. So, that's not the concept of homeschool. So,
Mhm.
I'm glad California is homeschool friendly.
So am I. I hope it stays that way.
Amen, sister. So, is there anything? I mean, you've said a ton, a lot, but anything that you want to say specifically to someone who is struggling, chronic pain or anything that God is putting on your heart, just to speak to that woman who may be struggling right now.
I guess I would say that you're not alone.
Mm,
And I think almost any of us can relate to some form of chronic suffering, right? And but
mm,
it can be debilitating. It can be really demoralizing. And some of those things can be alleviated or lessened. Some are not not able to be remedied here on this side of heaven, but
it's true.
we have a lot of things that we can do to give ourselves a better shot, right? So there are things that we can do, and I think that we can and should do that in ways that are reasonable and
Mhm.
honoring to God and not becoming extreme or worshiping health or
Yeah.
putting health on the altar where only God belongs. But we can and should do things
Mm,
that steward these bodies of ours that he's entrusted us with. And there's lots that we can do that is really sustainable. You do not have to spend more than you ought. You do not have to, I mean, not even just financially, but there are a lot of ways that you can do different things that can give you a better chance at having better health.
and I'm assuming you have some books about those topics.
Yeah, so my
So,
first book is
yeah.
called A Healthier Home, and that one is a room by room guide where I literally just go room by room
Wow.
and talk about different things that you can do that are either free or inexpensive, and then some, bigger ticket items for when and if the time comes for that, so that you can make your home and your life healthier. A lot of these things are completely free. I talk about opening your windows every day for at least 10 minutes a day, not wearing shoes in your house, and dusting your surfaces regularly. Some very simple and attainable things. But then I also talk about different products, like what are we using for our
Mhm.
oral care and our makeup or our cleaning
Right.
products? What can we be using instead of bleach if we're going to try and avoid
Right.
that? Just, really simple and practical tips. So it's not a book that I expect anyone to pick up, read cover to cover, and then go,
Right.
okay, got it. It's more of like a resource guide. I
Yep.
had likened it kind of similarly to a cookbook
Yeah.
where you're like, oh, I'm looking for a recipe about this. You can turn to it time and time
Cool.
again over the years because we on this side of heaven are never going to live perfectly non-toxic
Right.
lives.
Right.
There are always things that we can do to just level up over time. So that's a resource guide for that. And then my second book is a cookbook where I have over 75 recipes in there. They're all gluten-free, they're all whole food, and they're all very family friendly because they're
Mm.
literally what I feed my family all year long. I use the cookbook more than anyone. I made my tzatziki today. I made my banana bread yesterday. Like,
Mm. That's
so
so cool. Do you have a garden? Do you grow your own food? Do you?
we have a small garden, but I'm not the green thumb. It's my husband does a
Okay.
better job than I do. But yeah, I would love to do that one day.
That is so cool. And I love that approach. I mean, we do our part. Like we do have a part, and we do our part, and let God do the rest, and however He wants to use that. So there is a responsibility to steward our lives, to steward whatever it is that He gave us and our bodies and our health is important. And this year, I don't know why, I've just started down the journey of a healthy gut and what that looks like because as I get older, are more aches and pains, and I feel like a lot of it is due to inflammation. I always want to say inflammation, which it is sort of inflation, right? Um, and yeah, I'm going to be looking into your stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. A long time I had a cleaning business for like 25 years. It was mostly homes, but a lot of businesses as well. And I know that I was around a lot of chemicals,
Yeah.
a lot. And I have cut way back on that. I use a lot of vinegar and water and a few things of Dawn
Yeah.
just detergent in there. And so I'm doing little small steps in hopes that it will somehow have some good effects. But
Oh, it does. The little things, they're going to add up one way or the other, right?
yeah,
I think about sin too, these things that they
yes,
kind of creep into our lives where it's just a little bit of this and a little bit of that
right.
until we're bogged down by things. So, it's the same with how we're living our lives. So, if you're using a little bit of vinegar instead of a little bit of Clorox, then that makes
Yep.
a difference. It
Yeah, for
adds
sure.
up. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it's all very interesting and exciting, and I am actually going to be digging in a little more because it sounds very practical and very doable, the things that you talked about here today. So, and I love how you tie it all together because we're whole beings and everything affects everything.
Right. Yeah. If it becomes extreme and we're stressed, then we're not going to ever reduce our inflammation
At
or live healthy
all. No, you're
anyway.
right. You're
Yeah.
right.
But I have a website where you can use any search terms to look for different things that you're looking for, either blog posts or product
Okay,
recommendations,
cool.
and my Instagram as well. But yeah, I think
So or your website is a little less toxic as well.
it's all a little less toxic. Yeah.
And so do you blog? Do you have a blog
Not
not
as
as
much as
much?
I'd like to. I have a
Yeah.
few blogs up with things that I've shared in the past, but I would love to do more of that one day. One day.
One day. Yeah. And yeah, I get that. But hey, you're busy because you're running a business and you're homeschooling mama and you're doing all the things. So I get it.
Yeah.
Mm. Well, thank you for being a guest and sharing your parts of your life and your journey and that health thing is that had to have been painful. So thank you for spending a little bit of time here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. What a pleasure.
Good, good. Thank you, listener, for joining. I will be back next week, and I hope you are too.